Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you share with us, the articles, the research, the deep-seated questions, and, well, we try to extract the essential, actionable insights.
hmm
And today, we are wrestling with two words that I think for most of us feel pretty much interchangeable in daily conversation. And those words are belief and knowledge.
Yeah, and they're not just, semantic variations, even though we absolutely treat them that way all the time.
Mhm.
Whether we're arguing about the weather forecast or making a really high-stakes business decision, or even just interpreting a historical event, we rely on these mental structures we build with these two concepts.
Right.
And our source material for this deep dive flags the massive philosophical stakes here right away.
Yeah, think about the stakes. I mean, on a simple level, if you tell a friend, I know the train is leaving at 4 p.m., and they take you at your word, and then they miss it because it actually left at 3:50. What's the psychological and even the linguistic adjustment you have to make right then and there? You can't stand there and say, well, I knew it, but I was wrong. It doesn't make any sense.
It's incoherent.
You immediately have to downgrade that claim. You have to say, wait, I believed it left at 4? I guess I was mistaken.
And that downgrade, that's really the core mission of this deep dive. We're going to move beyond that, that everyday sort of fuzzy ambiguity to uncover the rigorous three-part philosophical definition of knowledge.
And why? Why go through the trouble?
Because the difference, as we're going to explore, it determines everything. Everything from how we conduct science to how we manage our own personal responsibility.
Okay, so we have to establish the most critical distinction right out of the gate. This is based on centuries of philosophical thought, and it's the rule that really sets the stage for everything that follows.
Let's lay it out.
You absolutely can hold a belief that is false. I mean, millions of people, probably billions, believe false things every single day. But you fundamentally, logically, cannot hold knowledge that is false.
That's the bedrock. If the statement is untrue, by definition, you never knew it.
You only thought you knew.
Exactly. So if that core distinction is the rule, that truth is sort of the gatekeeper for knowledge, then we really need to understand the building blocks. If knowledge is, let's say, the highly regulated exclusive club,
Okay.
then belief is the necessary membership card just to even get in line.
Okay, let's unpack this entire structure then.
Right.
If we want to understand the really rigorous standard of knowing, we have to start with the flexibility of believing.
You have to. It's the foundation.
So what exactly is a belief from a philosophical standpoint?
Well, a foundational starting point really is belief because it's the simplest and the broadest mental component. So philosophically, a belief is defined as the psychological attitude your mind takes toward a specific statement, what philosophers call a proposition.
A proposition? Okay, and just to be crystal clear for everyone, a proposition is just a declarative statement, right? Something that can be evaluated as either true or false.
Precisely. That proposition could be as mundane as the coffee machine is still running,
Mhm.
or, it could be way more complex like the current rate of inflation is unsustainable.
Or to get really speculative, there is intelligent life thriving on exoplanet Kepler 186.
Yes, exactly. In all of those cases, belief is just your mind accepting that proposition as being true.
So it's a purely internal state of acceptance. It's what you hold to be true in your own consciousness. And this is the key part. It's completely independent of whether external reality agrees with you.
Yes.
That's what gives belief its enormous flexibility, isn't it?
That flexibility is absolutely key. To believe something just means you accept it as true in your mind. And that acceptance, it carries this huge range of possibilities and intentions. You might accept it even if you openly acknowledge you might be wrong. You might accept it even if you lack any strong evidence at all.
But hold on, what's the spectrum here? If I have a belief that's based on, I don't know, pure superstition like, I believe if I wear my lucky socks, I'll win the lottery. Does the philosophical definition really treat that the same way as a belief based on, say, decades of peer-reviewed scientific research?
Functionally, yes. In the basic category of belief, they are treated the same. They are both mental states of assent. You're saying yes to a proposition in your mind.
Okay.
Now, the difference is the strength of the belief.
Yeah.
And, crucially, the justification for it, which we're definitely going to get to. But the core component, that attitude of acceptance, is shared. And this means beliefs exist on this enormous spectrum.
Let's detail that spectrum, because I think we often associate belief with something really strong, like a deep conviction or a core value.
And that's one end of it, for sure, that strong belief. It borders on certainty, often leads to action. But at the other end, the weak end, you have tentativeness or even just suspicion.
I'm like,
Well, if I say, I believe the restaurant is open, but I should probably call first. That's a belief, but it's a very lightly held one. It's an acceptance that just sort of favors one proposition. It's open over its negation. It's closed.
And what's even more interesting to me is that beliefs aren't always conscious. I mean, I hold thousands of unconscious beliefs about how the world functions. That the floor won't just vanish under my feet, that language works predictably.
Right.
I don't actively think about any of that until it's suddenly challenged.
And those are what we'd call foundational beliefs. They allow us to navigate reality. They're, supported by decades of experience, but they still qualify as beliefs. And again, the distinction remains that a belief is just a mental state. I can strongly believe the earth is flat, and that belief exists inside my head, completely regardless of the spherical reality outside my window.
That sets the necessary floor for this entire discussion then. Belief is all about what you hold to be true. It's subjective, it's variable, and it's not necessarily connected to objective truth at all. If we accept a proposition, we believe it. The whole process of getting to knowledge only begins after that.
Right. So if belief is this flexible mental attitude, moving to knowledge means we have to subject that attitude to some incredibly rigorous external standards. And this is where we introduce the classical and really the most influential definition in epistemology, which was formalized all the way back in antiquity by Plato. It's called the JTB model.
The JTB model. So knowledge is, at a minimum, true, justified belief. It sounds like a formula. And like any, chemical equation, if you remove one element, the whole thing fails.
That's a great analogy.
So let's break down the three necessary components one by one.
Okay, the first pillar is the most straightforward because we've really just covered it. Belief. You must accept the statement in your mind. If you don't believe the proposition P, you simply cannot know the proposition P.
For example?
For example, if you claim out loud, I know the answer to the complex math problem is 17, but internally, you're absolutely convinced the answer is 19, your statement that you know it's 17 it's incoherent. You have to internally assent to the proposition first.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, pillar number one is belief. Now, the second pillar, which we established as the non-negotiable gatekeeper, truth.
Absolutely. The statement, the proposition you believe, it must align with objective fact in the external world. If the statement is false, you are just mistaken. This is the chasm between subjective conviction and objective fact.
And this requirement is why knowledge is so demanding.
So demanding. If you claim to know the store's open at 8:00 a.m. and it is in fact closed, your claim fails the truth requirement, and therefore you never possessed knowledge, period.
All right. And finally, the third pillar. This is the one that prevents us from claiming we knew the outcome of a coin toss just because we happened to guess correctly. Justification.
Justification is the mechanism. It means you must have adequate reasons, strong evidence, or, sound grounds for your belief. It is the bridge connecting your internal mental state, your belief, to external reality, the truth. Without proper justification, even a true belief is just a lucky guess.
Wait, hold on a second. If I feel absolutely certain about something, and let's say I have 5 reliable sources telling me the store's open and then it turns out to be true, I get that. But why is it so important for philosophy to distinguish that from a belief I arrived at purely by guessing? If the outcome is the same, I correctly identified reality, why should the process matter so much?
That's the core tension, isn't it? And it's exactly why justification is essential. The process matters because knowledge must be reliable and non-accidental. If you got the correct answer, the truth, through an irresponsible method like guessing, you have no reason to expect that method to work again.
I see.
Knowledge requires the ability to replicate or rely on the process that led you to the truth. Justification is what ensures that your alignment with reality wasn't just, arbitrary.
Let's use the classic rain example from the sources to really crystallize those two scenarios.
Great idea. Let's start with a candidate for true knowledge. Scenario A. You believe the proposition, it is raining outside.
Okay.
You look, and it is raining outside. So the truth condition is met, and you believe it because you opened the window, you felt the drizzle on your hand, and you saw the drops hitting the pavement.
So that's your justification, which you got via perception.
Exactly. All three pillars stand firm. You have belief, it's true, and it's justified. That is knowledge.
Okay. Now, the flip side, true belief, but without knowledge. Scenario B.
In scenario B, you are, let's say, confined to a sealed, windowless subterranean bunker. You desperately need rain for your crops on the surface, so you perform a special rain dance while chanting a random prophecy that it is raining right now.
Okay, I'm with you.
And by some sheer cosmic fluke, your prophecy is correct. It is raining outside at that exact moment.
So in scenario B, you have the belief it's raining, and that belief happens to be true.
You do. But your method, this random chant and rain dance, it's completely disconnected from reality. It gave you zero reliable access to the truth. So you have a true belief, but you utterly lack sound justification.
I see the point now. If you use that rain dance prophecy method 1,000 times, it would fail 999 times, which proves the method itself is unreliable. Knowledge demands a reliable method, not just a lucky result.
Exactly. Knowledge demands intellectual responsibility. The combination of just belief and truth is not enough. Justification is that essential, responsibility-driven bridge.
So if we accept that JTB model, then we have to spend some significant time exploring the rigorous requirements of truth and justification, because I feel like those are the two elements we fudge the most in our daily conversations. Let's start with the absolute necessity of truth.
Truth is, well, it's absolute for knowledge. The distinction we really need to emphasize is the one between saying you know something and actually knowing it. We so often confuse the strength of our conviction, our psychological certainty, with the actual truth of the statement.
Right. So if I tell everyone at a dinner party, I know the secret ingredient in this sauce is paprika, and I'm 100% sure I feel it deep in my soul, but it turns out to be cayenne pepper.
Your claim to knowledge immediately collapses.
It's gone.
It is. The critical philosophical commitment here is that if a claim turns out to be false, the proper phrase is always, I thought I knew, but I was mistaken. You have to retroactively acknowledge that what you possessed was a highly confident, but ultimately false belief.
Not false knowledge.
Never false knowledge. The term knowledge can only be applied when truth is confirmed.
This really forces a kind of intellectual humility, doesn't it? Especially in areas where the consensus shifts, like in science or history. We often talk about how science changed its mind. For instance, for centuries, people believed the sun revolved around the Earth. That was accepted, it was justified by the observation of the time, and it was believed universally. When Copernicus came along, did we simply change what we knew?
That is a perfect example of this intellectual revision in action. We don't say that the knowledge of the Earth's centrality suddenly changed. We say that the old, highly supported belief, geocentrism, was overturned by a superior, better justified theory, which was heliocentrism.
I see.
The appearance of new superior evidence forces us to downgrade what we previously called knowledge into what it always was, a belief that just turned out to be wrong or, at best, incomplete. Knowledge is fundamentally tied to reality itself, not to our current best theory of reality.
Truth is externally defined. It's fixed. Okay, now let's turn to the mechanism that ties us to that fixed truth. Justification. This is the element that determines if our true belief was actually earned or if it was just lucky. How does justification manifest in the real world?
Justification details the responsible process by which we acquire true beliefs. And the sources of justification are really the tools we use to connect our minds to the external world. They generally fall into 5 primary categories that are worth exploring in detail.
Okay, let's start with the most immediate and foundational one, perception.
Perception is the justification we get from our senses. Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. If I believe the apple on the table is red, and I justify that belief by looking at the apple under normal light with my functioning vision, that is strong, direct justification.
But perception is inherently limited by our senses, right? I mean, if I look at that same apple under, say, an ultraviolet light, I might be justified in believing it's glowing purple, even if everyone else sees it as dull red.
Exactly. The justification depends on the context and the reliability of the sensory experience itself. So it's not foolproof.
Okay, that's perception. Next up, we have memory.
Memory is crucial because it allows justification to persist over time, even when the original source of the information is no longer present. I know the capital of France is Paris, not because I'm Googling it right now, but because I remember learning it and having that knowledge reinforced over and over again. But this is where we hit a major vulnerability. We know from cognitive science that memory is fallible. It's reconstructive. It's not like a perfect video playback.
And we all deal with that fallibility every single day. I still have this vivid memory of going to a concert and seeing a specific band member play this epic guitar solo, only to rewatch a recording of it years later and realize that band member wasn't even in the band yet.
Oh, wow.
My conviction was sky high, but my memory was fundamentally flawed, which means my justification was weak.
Exactly. Your belief was justified by your internal experience, your memory, but the justification itself was defective. So knowledge requires highly reliable memory.
Okay, then there's the purely internal calculation method.
Reason.
Reason involves logic, inference, and calculation. This is justification that is, in theory, independent of direct sensory experience. If I know that all equilateral triangles are also equiangular, I am justified in believing that the triangle I am currently looking at, which I know to be equilateral, is also equiangular.
You use deduction. I use deduction, which is an incredibly high-level form of justification. But we also rely on induction extrapolating from past experiences to future events. If the sun has risen every single day for 4 billion years, I am highly justified in believing it will rise tomorrow. But that's inductive reasoning, which always carries a small, theoretical chance of being wrong.
And the fourth category is massive in the modern era: testimony. We rely on what other people tell us.
The vast majority of what any of us claims to know about climate change, about historical figures, about advanced physics, is based on testimony. We're justified in believing it because a reliable source, a teacher, a scientist, a reputable news organization, a consensus of experts, has presented the evidence to us.
So our justification here rests entirely on the reliability of that source.
Entirely. And this is where the modern world introduces these profound challenges. In an era of deepfakes, sophisticated AI misinformation, and these highly siloed echo chambers on social media, the reliability of testimony is constantly under assault.
That feels like the crisis of our time, really.
It is the crisis of justification in 2024. If I see a video of a world leader saying something shocking, my perception justifies the belief that they said it. But if the source of that video is a deepfake, my justification is completely compromised.
So the task of acquiring knowledge today requires us to spend far more time validating the source of the testimony than even validating the content itself.
I think that's right. Knowledge requires a reliable conveyor of information.
And finally, number 5, we have experience.
Right. Experience covers repeated empirical patterns, practical trials, observation. If I mix baking soda and vinegar and it foams up every single time, I am justified in believing this reaction will occur again. This justification is built up personally through observation and testing, often through a less formal version of the scientific method.
So we have these 5 powerful tools: perception, memory, reason, testimony, and experience. But they all vary in their strength and their reliability.
They do.
And knowledge demands that we seek the strongest possible justification appropriate to the proposition we're making.
Precisely. A belief about fundamental physics requires justification based on rigorous experimentation. That's experience and reason and testimony from the global scientific community. A belief about what you ate for breakfast only requires highly reliable memory and perception.
So knowledge demands this intellectual responsibility. It's not enough to be accidentally correct. You have to earn the right to claim certainty by having strong, reliable grounds for your claim.
That's the bar.
We've now thoroughly established the 3 pillars: belief, truth, and justification. For thousands of years, the JTB model was considered pretty much the definitive answer to the question, what is knowledge? But then philosophers in the mid-20th century introduced a massive, structure-shattering problem.
Yeah, this is where the discussion gets really interesting and truly complex. In 1963, a philosopher named Edmund Gettier published this very short 3-page paper that completely upended the field of epistemology.
2 pages, that's it.
That's it. And he showed that you can have a belief that is true and is justified, yet still feel intuitively that genuine knowledge hasn't been achieved. And the reason is because the truth component was met accidentally, or as he put it, by luck in the wrong way.
That feels like a contradiction.
It feels because JTB doesn't demand a causal connection between the justification and the truth. It just demands that they both be present at the same time. Let's use the classic thought experiment from our sources to make this clear. The stopped clock.
Okay, the stopped clock. Let's say we walk by a bank lobby. I need to know the time. I look up at this beautiful, expensive-looking clock on the wall, and it reads 3.0.
Okay, so you have very strong justification. You have perceived a high-quality instrument that is supposed to be reliable. So you form the belief. It is 3.0.
Makes sense.
Now here's the twist. Unknowingly to you, this clock stopped working exactly 24 hours ago. But by some bizarre, precise accident, you happen to look at it exactly 1 cycle later, at precisely 3.00 p.m. the next day.
So my belief, the proposition it is 3.00, is actually true.
It is.
So I have a true, justified belief. It seems like I have knowledge. But if I don't have knowledge here, what do I have?
You have a fluke, a coincidence. Your justification was relying on the assumption that the clock was working, but the truth of your statement relied on a completely unrelated accidental timing coincidence.
So the connection, the
Mhm.
causal link between my reason for believing it and the fact that it was true was severed by the broken mechanism.
It was severed,
Yeah.
and philosophers overwhelmingly agree
Right.
this is not knowledge.
So the Gettier problem is less about external reality and more about the internal integrity of the justification process itself. The process I used was inherently unreliable because the object of my justification, the clock, was defective even though I didn't know it.
Exactly. And to show this is a structural problem, not just some weird timing quirk, let's look at a more complex Gettier-style case. This one often involves making a deduction from a premise that is justified but ultimately false.
Okay, lay it out.
All right. Imagine a job candidate named Smith. Smith is justified in believing two separate propositions. First, that Jones will get the job because the CEO told Smith that Jones was the clear frontrunner.
Okay, strong justification from testimony.
Right. And second, Smith is justified in believing that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket because Smith personally counted them 10 minutes ago.
Okay, strong justification from perception. So Smith has solid reasons for both of those beliefs.
He does. Smith then deductively reasons that since Jones will get the job and has 10 coins in his pocket, a new proposition, we'll call it P, must be true. And P is the person who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket.
That's a sound deduction.
Yeah.
So Smith believes P.
And he's justified in believing P. He is justified belief. Now for the twisted truth component.
Here it comes.
In reality, the CEO was misleading him. Smith is completely wrong about Jones. Jones does not get the job. Against all odds, Smith gets the job.
Oh.
And completely coincidentally, Smith, who didn't count his own pocket change, also happens to have exactly 10 coins in his pocket.
Ah, I see it. So the proposition P, the person who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, is true. Because Smith is the person who got the job, and Smith has 10 coins.
We have a true, justified belief. Smith's belief was justified by good evidence about Jones. But the truth of the statement rests on accidental, unknown facts about Smith.
His justification mechanism completely failed to connect him to the actual truth of the situation.
It was aimed at the wrong target. His true beliefs survived despite his flawed reasoning, not because of it.
That's profound. It means knowledge requires something more than just lining up J, T, and B. It requires that the justification causes the truth element to be accessed responsibly, not just stumble upon it by accident.
That is the deeper point. The Gettier problem shows that knowledge is a far more complex, stable standard than just having reasons. It demands that there's no hidden fluke, no lucky accident that makes your true belief correct.
The Gettier problem really complicates those external, objective requirements for knowledge. But if we move back into our own personal experience, the biggest confusion in daily life probably isn't about broken clocks. It's about our own internal feelings of certainty. We are constantly blurring the line between how sure we feel and how sure we should be based on the evidence.
That internal-external divide is really the heart of the matter. When we declare in a discussion, "I know this is true," we are almost always talking about the intensity of our internal conviction. Philosophy, however, requires us to split certainty into two fundamentally different concepts.
Okay, so let's define them. Psychological certainty versus epistemic certainty.
Psychological certainty is purely subjective. It is that internal, emotional, or mental state of feeling absolutely sure about a proposition. This is just belief taken to its highest possible intensity. I can feel psychologically certain that my favorite team will win the championship tomorrow, even if all the odds are stacked against them. I've committed to that belief.
And we know, sometimes painfully, that you can be 100% psychologically certain and still be demonstrably completely wrong. It's an internal commitment that carries absolutely no objective guarantee.
Correct. Psychological certainty is just a very, very strong belief. Epistemic certainty, on the other hand, is the objective standard that philosophers are pursuing. It means being in a position where error is impossible, or at the very least, extremely unlikely, based on rigorous justification, external evidence, and established truth.
So it's an external measure.
It's an external measure of the quality of the belief, regardless of how intense your subjective feeling about it is.
So the difference between belief and knowledge isn't about how strongly I hold the conviction. It's about the quality and reliability of the evidence supporting that conviction and whether that conviction actually aligns with reality. I could know the basic math fact that 2 plus 2 is 4 without feeling any dramatic psychological certainty about it, just because the epistemic justification, the logic, the mathematical proof is ironclad.
That is the crucial distinction. And you can, philosophically, be uncertain. You
Mhm.
can feel unsure and still know something because the justification is sound and the truth is established. And this tension between the internal feeling and the external requirement, it becomes paramount when we consider the domain of faith.
Right. Our sources rightly point out that in spiritual and religious contexts, belief and faith are absolutely central terms. They often revolve around concepts like trust and commitment. How does that relate to our rigorous definition of knowledge?
Well, faith is a category of belief that often involves propositions about things that are, almost by definition, beyond the scope of empirical, repeatable scientific justification. Faith frequently relies on internal experience or revelation or tradition for its justification.
And there are philosophical schools that tackle this directly. For instance, a school of thought called evidentialism would argue that religious claims should be held to the same standard as scientific claims. They would require justification that is universally shareable like data or logic.
That's right. An evidentialist would demand empirical justification. If you claim to know God exists, they would ask, what is the testable, observable evidence for that? And since that kind of evidence is generally lacking, or at least open to wide interpretation, they would place it firmly in the category of belief.
Whereas a different school, like fideism, would argue that faith is a completely distinct category, maybe even antagonistic to reason, where belief is based on a willful commitment or a deep internal conviction, making that external philosophical standard totally irrelevant.
And you see this in the language people use. Many religious thinkers use language that sounds like knowledge. I know God is good, often based on a deeply held personal conviction or scriptural authority, but others are more cautious. They speak instead of trust and commitment, precisely because they recognize the philosophical hurdle of justification.
Because the justification isn't universally accessible. If my justification for a spiritual belief is a private mystical experience I have justification for myself, maybe, but I can't share that with another person in a way that compels them to accept the truth of my proposition.
Exactly. It fails the epistemic test of public accountability.
So, the material suggests that faith often represents more of an existential commitment, a decision to organize your life around a proposition. It just confirms our initial structural point. Belief is this gigantic category that encompasses everything from superstition to a scientific hypothesis to a deep spiritual commitment.
And knowledge is that narrow, highly demanding slice of belief that manages to satisfy the shared, rigorous external standards of truth and justification.
We've navigated this really complex philosophical landscape, from JTB to the Gettier problem to the nature of certainty. Now we have to connect this back to the listener. So, what does this all mean? Why should you, the learner, adopt the intellectual burden of distinguishing between belief and knowledge in your daily life?
It matters. It matters profoundly because our ability to function rationally, both personally and as a society, hinges on knowing the boundary between what we merely accept and what we have actually verified. Let's start with the largest application: science, medicine, and public policy.
In science, the entire process is fundamentally dedicated to establishing justification, right? A scientist who proposes a hypothesis is articulating a belief, albeit a highly informed one.
Yes.
And the scientific method is the engine that attempts to add reliable, repeatable justification to that belief.
And this is so essential for separating genuine progress from just promising leads. Think about medical research. When a new drug is in phase I trials, researchers believe it may be effective and safe. If that's a justified belief, it's based on their laboratory work. But because the justification is still weak, a small sample size, limited testing policy dictates it cannot be dispensed to the general public.
You can't just go get it at the pharmacy.
No. Now contrast that with a phase III drug that has gone through years of rigorous double-blind trials, peer review, and FDA approval.
A whole different ballgame.
It is. That phase III drug has amassed such overwhelming, reliable, repeatable evidence, that's the justification, that we now treat its efficacy and safety profile as established knowledge. And the policy is radically different for those two categories.
So policies based on mere belief, without that strong, repeatable evidence, whether it's in medicine or climate strategy or economic policy, are inherently more risky than those based on well-established knowledge.
Far more risky.
Right.
Failing to respect that distinction can be disastrous. It's the difference between acting on the belief that a correlation exists versus acting on the knowledge that causation has been proven.
And in public discourse, recognizing this is crucial. When we're discussing a controversial topic, the inability to distinguish between what you know, based on shared rigorous evidence, and what you just feel or believe, based on anecdote or personal conviction, that's what leads to intractable gridlock. That's what leads to the spread of misinformation.
It absolutely is.
And that intellectual responsibility, it extends deep into our personal lives, too. We don't demand peer-reviewed studies to trust our friends, but we still operate within this kind of framework.
We do. We navigate life operating on millions of beliefs that are justified by context. We believe our friend will keep a secret based on a shared history, their proven character, and mutual trust. That shared history provides the justification.
We don't know they'll keep the secret in the absolute epistemic sense. Anything is possible, I guess. But we have strong, reliable grounds for that belief.
Exactly. And that framework is also the engine of intellectual humility, which I think is one of the most valuable personal takeaways here.
How so?
Well, distinguishing knowledge from belief forces us to remain intellectually humble about our own claims. If the evidence for my political position is based purely on testimony from sources that have a clear agenda, I have to be honest with myself and admit I have a high conviction but potentially low bias justification.
And that realization encourages us to stay open to correction when new evidence shifts.
It has to. It acknowledges that even our best justified claims are provisional. If that reliable friend you mentioned suddenly breaks a trust, my justification for believing they will keep the next secret is instantly weakened, and I have to responsibly revise my belief about their reliability.
That capacity for revision and humility is essential.
It is. And finally, let's consider the ethics tied to all of this. Acting solely on mere beliefs without adequate justification carries profound ethical risks.
Like spreading misinformation.
Precisely. Spreading misinformation happens when people mistake a strong, unsupported opinion for a verified fact and then share it as if it were knowledge. It is deeply irresponsible to claim knowledge where only belief exists.
And being unfair to others or making harmful societal decisions?
Often stems from acting on suspicion or prejudice, which are just beliefs lacking justification, instead of seeking out verifiable facts.
So aiming for knowledge, that combination of truth plus justification, is not just some abstract academic exercise. It makes us more careful intellectual citizens.
It does. It makes us more careful in what we assert, more accountable for the claims we make, and ultimately more respectful of reality itself. If you claim to know something, you take on the responsibility for the chain of evidence and reliability that supports it. If you only believe it, the ethical requirement is to acknowledge that gap and ideally pursue better justification.
This has been a deeply challenging, but I think a really rewarding exploration of the two most foundational words in our vocabulary. If we had to boil this entire deep dive down to the most memorable summary for you, the learner, to carry forward, we have to return to the definition.
Let's consolidate the difference as simply as we can.
Okay, start with belief.
Belief. This is the flexible, subjective acceptance of a statement. It's just, I think this is true. It requires no external verification. It can be true or it can be false, and it can be held strongly or weakly.
And now knowledge.
Knowledge. This is the rigorous, demanding, objective standard. It's, I think this is true, it really is true, and I have good, solid reasons to believe it. Reasons that reliably connect me to the truth, and not just by luck.
And the final, critical relationship between the two.
All knowledge involves belief, because you have to accept the statement in your mind to begin with. But emphatically, not all belief is knowledge. The vast majority of our mental landscape is composed of belief, and that's just how we have to operate. Knowledge is the hard one, carefully curated, and much smaller section of that landscape.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your day.
The challenge isn't merely defining knowledge in the abstract. The real challenge is applying that definition to ourselves. Living wisely requires recognizing the precise boundaries of what we merely believe, being honest with ourselves and with others about those boundaries, and then committing to the hard work of constantly seeking better justification.
So the next time you catch yourself claiming to know something,
Ask yourself, what is my justification, and could a broken clock have accidentally led me to this truth? That commitment to critical self-assessment and a genuine openness to change, well, that's the entire point.